If I had to draw just a general distinction between us, so first of all, I actually announced when I was going to be running against the incumbent who currently holds the position, Congresswoman Kay Granger, who's chairwoman of appropriations, one of the most powerful people in all of Washington, D.C. But I felt called to serve. State Representative Craig Goldman announced the day after Kay Granger withdrew from the race because he wants the position. I'm actually endorsed by Attorney General Ken Paxton. He worked to impeach Ken Paxton. I'm an America First candidate who believes in the policies of Donald Trump. He's actually part of the Bush establishment. Another way that you can distinguish between us is that I'm not taking lobbyist money, and not only does he accept lobbyist money, his brother is actually a lobbyist down in Austin, and I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up going up to D.C. with him if he were to be elected. Well, I have kind of a macro overview. He is the current Speaker of the House, Dade Phelan, who our Lieutenant Governor likes to call California Dade. Obviously, they don't get along. And for good reason. Dade Phelan became Speaker of the House because he went to the Democrats who voted in a block and said, if you guys all support me, I'll only need 12 to 14 Republicans, and then I can ensure that you guys will have committee chair positions and that you guys will have some say in the legislative process, even though the Republicans control the majority. Well, Craig Goldman is actually Dade Phelan's second lieutenant. So any of the shortcomings for the Congress the last several sessions can be attributed as part of under his watch as part of the leadership team. So I'll give you just a few examples from this last legislative session, which was so egregiously bad that our governor had to call 4 special sessions, and even then they didn't get all their agenda items passed. But he voted to impeach Ken Paxton, who was voted in the year before by almost 4.3 million Texans. He also refused to restore the Attorney General the ability to go persecute election fraud, which had been struck down by our Criminal Court of Appeals. They failed to ban drag queen story hour in libraries. They failed to pass a law prohibiting ownership of Texas land by hostile foreign governments. They failed to pass a law to remove judges here in the state of Texas who refused to follow Texas law. They failed to support parental rights, most noticeably by school choice, which is, again, was something that was one of Governor Abbott's key priorities. It's just, the list kind of goes on and on. In fact, I like to say that the Senate passes good conservative legislation, and unfortunately the Texas House is where good ideas go to die. So that's on the macro level. On the micro level, he fails to vote on controversial or key issues. For example, the heartbeat bill and then the trigger law that went into effect when Roe versus Wade were overturned. He was there. He made votes on the House floor several times that day, but he failed to vote on those. Another one example in which why this was controversial or why he decided not to take a stand on this is beyond me. But the Senate passed a measure that was up for a constitutional amendment, and they passed it 30-1. There's 32 members, so almost every single Democrat voted for this as well, was going to stipulate that in order to vote in a Texas election, you had to be a U.S. citizen. It went to the Texas House, where it died because it didn't receive the 2/3 majority it needed. State Representative Goldman voted present. So if you can't even take a stand on whether or not you have to be a U.S. citizen to vote, I don't know that that necessarily portrays you as America First. Too often times he votes with the Democrats. There are candidly a number of them in the state. Again, it's not any one vote per se. It's just the overall legislative agenda in general. I mean, you can go down in which that Texas scorecard, the website, the grades actually base their scores on individual votes. So again, don't take my word for it. You can actually go to the website and Texans for Physical Conservatism or Young Conservatives, they'll give him a grade and assess based on individual votes. But you'll see that when they're marking that he didn't vote the right way, in general he's voting with the Democrats, which is something that the Texas House has done all too often. I could get into the individual votes, which, again, I encourage people to reference and look into. But what I would say in general is we're not talking about a freshman down in Austin. We're talking about somebody who's been down there now for 11 years, part of the leadership team. So if he had priorities such as the ones that I listed that have died in the Texas House, if those had been priorities to him, which were key issues for Republicans, those would have passed. Again, this is not somebody who just went down there, they had one vote, I need to take a look at the vote. I think that being part of that leadership cabal, you can attribute the failures of the entire Texas House, again, to the Dirty Dozen, of which he is one of the critical members of that team.